radio show host Tony Katz with us. Didn't think we'd ever be talking about this in your hometown of Indianapolis.
Unfortunately, this is something we do talk about. It was it a year ago, and the FedEx building was attacked by a disgruntled employee. We have dealt with this before. We have seen a continued violence conversation before, but the conversation, of course, is about whether or not the gun is the issue or whether or not there's a societal breakdown issue. What we know about this shooter, nothing. No police history, no criminal history. Some things as a juvenile. He's 20 years old. He looks like a kid who would be in my my oldest high school class. And why this happened, we still don't have an answer. But your argument, or I should say how you're bringing this up, is absolutely true, because we have already seen from media outlets here in Indianapolis, where I host radio shows, plural, we have heard conversation of, the mall had a policy that you're not allowed to have firearms. That's pretty interesting that someone brought a gun there anyway. They're actually going after this man, Mr. Dickin, for actually being somebody who was prepared to protect and defend himself and others.
It's fascinating to me, the level of advocacy that happens, and I'm thinking about there, even in Indiana. This is Justin Kohler, who is an anchor on the CBS station there. The term Good Samaritan came from a Bible passage of a man who stopped on the side of the road to help a man who was injured and ignored. I cannot believe we live in a world where the term can equally apply to someone killing someone. My God. That's the journalism in Indianapolis?
This is the journalism that comes out of J schools. So this is an endemic problem all across the country. It comes from an unwillingness to recognize that your ideology may not be accurate. This gunman was stopped. And we take this and we take it, maybe the proper word is juxtapose it, to what happened in Uvalde, where you had near 400 police officers and no one entered the building, or I should say no one entered the classroom.
Right.
You enter the classroom to stop the killing. This man not only engaged a shooter, but as Chief Eisen discussed it today in that press conference that you shared a little bit of, he actually advanced on the shooter. This is not a guy known to have military training or police training. And not only is he advancing on a shooter, he's doing this, according to the chief, moving people behind him so they can get to safety. This is an incredible story and proves that if you are proactive, you can reduce what is horror. Our problem still exists with why somebody would engage this shooting. That is a real issue, and I believe it is a societal issue. But it does not explain away that you can be proactive, you can stop more horror from happening.
One of the reasons we like to have you on, because you're willing to acknowledge that two things can be true at once, right? Number one, we've got a real issue with mass shootings in America. Especially with young men who there may be some red flags, but they're missed, and then all of a sudden they end up with an AR-15. And then also you've got this other thing true, which is that the Dickin is a real hero here. Why and how did we get to the place, and more importantly, how do we get away from the place where the media organizations of America that control so much of our information aren't willing to admit that these two things can be true and cover both equally?
What happens when ideology becomes your religion? If guns are always bad, how could there possibly be a situation where the gun is good? How can it possibly be that somebody, a good guy with a gun, can do good things? Now, I have made the statement on air, and I've made the statement afterwards, that 3 people were murdered in this. This is an absolutely horrible story. If it wasn't for this man, that number is 23, and it could be into the hundreds, as you discussed. How could you deny that the issue, therefore, is not a firearm issue, and the Second Amendment is not the issue, but rather what is leading people to these causes? And on the flip side of that is people who realize they need to protect and defend themselves. But if your ideology is your religion, if you have to believe it in every way, you must discount everything else in order for your religious identity to be true. And that's the horror coming out of J schools. And that is what people see as a great political divide in the country.
There's no question the divide works. We expect it out of politicians. You expect better out of journalists. We said that we didn't think that the president was either going to go to Indianapolis or invite Dickin to the White House. We'll see if our prophecy comes true. You mentioned Uvalde, though, and this is so troubling. 400 police officers, breakdowns literally from the first shot until the end, when it was actually Border Patrol agents defying the orders of the on-scene commander to go in and take on the gunman. That's what we learned from this report from the Texas State House that came out. This would be the question. If 400 police officers allow this to go on for 77 minutes, despite billions of dollars in training, all the school safety measures that exist in Uvalde, on and on and on and on, how do parents send their kids to school in September and go, oh, they're safe wherever they are in America?
I think two things, because A, you still want to send your kids to school, although maybe an education change is necessary. You have to start by firing people. You can't accept the idea that, well, there was a breakdown and, oh, well, we'll do it better next time. People have to lose their jobs. And I argue, while I'm a fan of police, that police officers in this situation have to lose their pensions. There has to be such a strong response that every officer across the country has to know that this is how we handle it. And I think what added insult to injury here, to use a horrible phrase, and I don't mean to be flip or glib, is that parents were prevented from going in. As I've said on air, you're not going to prevent parents from going in the next time. They're going to do what they have to protect their kids. They're going to do it. Police here I don't think understand the level of cascading effect of the unbelievably unacceptable actions in Uvalde.
Yeah, I had not thought about to that point that the next time that police say stand back, parents are going to say, I saw what happened to kids when parents were told to stand back in Uvalde,
100%.
and now we won't. Is what happened in Indianapolis going to change things in a way that perhaps things that happened in Uvalde haven't?
Well, so Greenwood is a suburb south of Indianapolis, fantastic place that has built itself up tremendously well. If you argue, are things going to change and people are going to call for a real common sense gun reform, well, there will be the Shannon Watts crowd and the Michael Bloomberg crowd that continues to engage in this nonsense. There are going to be people who realize that maybe gun-free zones are actually dangerous places. And this idea of proclaiming gun-free zone is a license for other people to do harm and to do damage and to hope they have the most unarmed people that they're able to then affect. Maybe it'll start changing that and people will realize that it is up to them to protect and defend themselves. But until we start getting into the conversation of what societally is bringing people to the idea that they have to shoot up a school or shoot up the FedEx building or go about shooting up a food court, until we start having ugly conversations about that, yeah, we aren't going to make things better. We have to engage that conversation and protect the Second Amendment.
You make a great point that in any difficult situation, you've got to have the ugly conversations. In order to have that, you have to acknowledge things that are not necessarily helpful to your side and deal with them honestly. Tony, it's good to see you. Thank you.
Always.
Yeah.